Stay tuned for the 3 most common mistakes landlords make that get them in hot water. Hi, I'm William Dolan, and this is Esquire Advice, where we explain complicated and lucrative real estate and business topics. Remember, we are not forming a lawyer-client relationship by way of this channel. Always consult your local attorney before taking any action. With that said, grab a pencil and a piece of paper and get ready to learn. Welcome to our episode on the 3 most common landlord mistakes. But before we get started, please kindly hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can keep bringing you valuable and profitable content. The first mistake is maintenance. All landlord-tenant codes will indicate that certain maintenance items must be the responsibility of the landlord. All residential landlords are going to be responsible to provide for essential services because they are a part of what is called the implied warranty of habitability. We're talking about hot water, heat, running water generally, and electricity. And if any of them fail at any point, the landlord must remedy the situation in 48 hours or the tenants will have super rights. But that is not where landlords generally make this maintenance mistake. They make the mistake with the more mundane maintenance items. For example, in the Delaware Landlord-Tenant Code, a landlord must make all repairs and arrangements necessary to keep and put the residential unit in as good a condition as it was or ought to have been at the commencement of the lease. The landlord must also maintain all electrical, plumbing, and other facilities in good working order. See 25 Del C 5305 A4 and 5. Now, those really savvy Delaware landlords are going to say, but Bill, doesn't the Landlord-Tenant Code also say that if you agree in writing that the tenant is to perform specific repairs and maintenance tasks, that's allowed? That is probably the #1 most misunderstood provision in the Delaware Landlord-Tenant Code. The provision is 25 Del C 5305C. And it says, if and only if all of the following are true, that the landlord can have the tenant do the applicable maintenance and repairs. The work to be performed by the tenant is for the benefit of the rental unit. Okay, that one's easy. The work is not necessary to bring a non-complying rental unit into compliance with a building or housing code or other ordinance, so it has to be more minor stuff. There must be adequate consideration that is above and beyond anything the tenant is already entitled to in the lease agreement. This is a big one. That means the landlord must pay the tenant to do the work. The agreement must be entered into in good faith and not for the purpose of evading an obligation of the landlord. Most importantly, the tenant must agree to do it, and there must be a separate and conspicuous writing apart from the lease agreement. In short, that means the landlord cannot just include the responsibility for maintenance and repairs in the lease. Instead, the landlord must, #1, pay the tenant reasonable compensation for it. 2, the tenant must agree to it in a separate and conspicuous writing that's different from the lease agreement. And 3, the maintenance or repairs cannot include bigger ticket items. Okay, the second most common mistake is with respect to security deposits. The Delaware Landlord-Tenant Code requires that landlords keep tenant deposits in a separate escrow account with a federally insured bank that has branches in Delaware, and the landlord must inform the tenant where the security deposit will be located. The easiest way to do this is to provide the name and address of the local bank branch in the lease or rental agreement. But almost no landlords do that. If the landlord fails to deposit the security deposit in the way we just discussed, or if the landlord fails to provide the information to the tenant within 20 days of a written request from the tenant for the location of the bank, the security deposit is deemed forfeit and must be returned to the tenant. If the landlord does not return the security deposit to the tenant within 20 days of forfeiture, the landlord is liable to the tenant not only for the security deposit, but also damages in the amount of 2 months' rent. So just provide the information in the lease and take this risk off the table. The third most common mistake landlords make is not providing tenants with a copy of the summary of the Landlord-Tenant Code as prepared by the Consumer Protection Unit of the Attorney General's office. And you need to do this up front. You should get each tenant to sign a document confirming that it received a copy of this summary, because if you fail to provide the summary, the tenant will have the right to plead ignorance of the law as a defense. This would be a disaster for the landlord, since the tenant would not be held to any of his or her obligations under the Landlord-Tenant Code if he or she simply said, "I didn't know that." In case the inference is not clear, generally no party can claim ignorance of the law. In other words, usually all parties are charged with knowledge of the law, which puts the burden on parties to do their due diligence and know what they are allowed to do and what they are supposed to do. I hope you have enjoyed this episode on the 3 most common mistakes landlords make. Please kindly hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can keep bringing you valuable and profitable content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.